absolutely nothing to do with NATO impinging on their neighbors. Ukraine wants to take a pro-Western approach and they want to join NATO. NATO has stated that they're open to Ukraine joining. Uh, where that leads from here, I don't know. First of all, take off what you just said there. We probably should be putting our heads in the sand at this point in time because
You
everything's
should.
falling apart. Um, but no, I am the best foreign policy expert that Asparagus could afford tonight on about 4 hours' notice. So I get to be the guy that explains this out. So we've got to go back to the fall apart of the Soviet Union. In 1991, when the Soviet Union fell apart, uh, Ukraine actually had about a third of the Soviet Union's strategic nuclear arsenal. So they, in agreement with Russia, I want to say it was the UK and America, you have this agreement that we would protect them, we would do everything we could for their sovereignty, and in return they would get rid of all of their nuclear weapons. Um, that deal was pretty much closed by 1994. It was what was it? It was an agreement. I can't even remember the agreement, but it was all done through the OSCE. Um, Fast forward to 2013, I think most people know the history of most of the bloc states as far as nobody had any money, everybody grew their own food, and it was generally rough for everybody over there. Um, it still is in a lot of them, but regardless, 2013 in December, um, at this point in time, there was a party in power that was very favorable to the Russians. Um, that would be the Yankovic. He was the president, and there was a massive protest that took place in 2013 that erupted into violence when the special forces were brought in. Um, Hi, Spork. Um, um, that devolved into basically the ousting of Yankovic. Uh, there was a pro-Western government that was put into power. It was, depending on who you want to ask, it was a good thing, it was a bad thing. It's one of those, which side you want to take. Uh, Come February, this is when Russia started digging in their heels about everything. In February, the Russo-Ukrainian war took off, and at the time, it was reported that it was just vacationing Russians or people that had family in Ukraine or anything like that. It was never the Russian military that was doing this, but they took over Crimea, which is the location of one of the only open water, warm water ports that was part of the Soviet Union that was being leased to Russia at the time. And with the oust of the pro-Russian party, that became a concern for Russia because they thought they were going to lose it. So they just took it. Along with that, they took Donetsk and Luhansk. Um, so that is kind of what put us to where we are right now, where you have basically a stalemate in the eastern part of the country that's just been simmering for a very long time. There's been shots fired both ways. Um, Most people know what happened in Crimea with it being taken over by the Russians. The water supply was shut off, power was shut off, brought back, the usual tit for tat back and forth.
So that's what happened in Crimea a few years ago when everyone kind of looked shocked and nobody did anything about it, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yep. That was in 2014 is when that started. I don't have an exact date for when it ended, if you want to call it that. Uh, as yes, there we go. Spork, Budapest Memorandum. Thank you. That was the agreement that Ukraine had with all the other countries for defense. Um, the end of 2021 is when things started heating up again. There was military drills that should have contained about 10,000 troops. Um, and this was November, December. These drills took place, and those troops never really went
In
home.
Ukraine,
No, this was Russian,
in Russia.
Russian military drills. The beginning of 2022, which leads us up to where we are right now. Um, the Russia and Belarus drills take place, which should have been 30,000 troops. So now, if you add both of those together, assuming that you didn't pull out the 10,000, which normally would have been gone by now, you have 40,000 troops that are Belarus and Russia, just bordering countries. As of today, um, it depends on what source you want to go with. The
It's always the
American,
case.
right. Um, Biden had a speech today that stated there was 150,000 troops at the border. Uh, Intelligence before that was 120,000, with another 10,000 arriving. Either way, it's a lot more than the 40,000 that were there. This put everybody at alert. There was a lot of concern about the number of troops that were there. They were amassing. Russia kept on saying that it was just drills. We're going through practicing. Uh, but they keep on, they're setting up forward, refueling bases, ammo dumps, things like that. Everything that you would need to set up a war, or at least a land grab. And I've got this the feed up right now, trying to see if there's anything else. I noticed about 2 hours ago, there was satellite imagery coming back that a bridge. So you have the Pripyat, the river that runs down most through the center of most of Ukraine, and there's only a number of crossings that go across there. Uh, the Russians actually just created another bridge as of today. I'm sure a temporary makeshift bridge, but it was big enough to be caught by satellites, which
Oh,
increases the numbers of crossings and makes them more available should the normal bridges be blown out. Um, Today, Russia said they were pulling out troops. There's no signs of that. There have been a lot of sightings of aircraft taking off and landing in the area. You can use open source intel to see the location of several drone flights. The United States has had Global Hawks, I believe, up over across the Ukrainian border for the last 24 to 48 hours nonstop. We had a B-52 that was running what would have been in the Cold War so when a bomber flies, if it's got nuclear weapons, it needs to stay away from populated areas just to make sure not more than the normal stupid things happen. Um, this two bombers, two refuelers on Sunday or Saturday, I believe it was, actually made a flight that would have mimicked a lot of those Cold War flights. And it was just, I think, a show of force, because at that point in time, they were up for 24 hours doing a tour. They actually flew from, um, oh, I can't remember the name of the base. It's in in England. They flew south of Europe all the way across through the Straits and over to Southeast Asia and back in one flight. Um, with that, you've got any number of like I was saying before, the videos of tanks moving, helicopters moving, parking in fields. These aren't being transported like you would normally have by train if they were just going from A to B. These are all down and deployed. Um, there's a lot of analysts that are getting concerned about the fact that they literally are setting up for war, and they're saying they're not. Uh, One of the
I-
things that was, whoop, go ahead.
isn't everyone setting up for war always say they're
Yeah,
not?
yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
pretty much it. Well,
yeah.
I mean, why would you announce it? Um, there was a rumor, I think, that got published on Monday saying that this attack is going to happen Wednesday night. We're already past the Wednesday night point for that. Uh, that was a rumor that people might have seen at some point in time. This attack's going to happen on Wednesday. And a couple of the Western news sources uh, reported the president of Ukraine saying, "Well, yeah, the attack's going to happen on Wednesday, I've been told." Well, he was joking. He was saying that he was told by Western media. He wasn't saying that he was told by any official sources.
Okay.
One of the assumptions was there would be massive cyber attacks on state government websites uh, within 24 to 48 hours, preempting any attack. That has actually taken place in the last 2-3 hours or so. There has been a lot of DDoS attacks and
Oh, it started.
oh yeah. As much as you want to say it started, the cyber attacks have definitely started, and it looks like they are a lot of
Yeah, I see it here.
yeah.
Ukraine says government websites and banks were hit with denial of service attack 5 hours ago.
Yep.
Ukrainian army major banks hit by cyber attacks as Russian military threat looms.
Yeah, I agree completely, Spork. The fact that you could pick up the drone, I've actually got a map here I can send to Asparagus if he wants to pop it up.
Yeah. I pop it up.
That is a map of the path of one of our global hawks that is currently flying over the area, and you can see right along the area where they're going to, or where they're checking everything out. Get back to this. There we go. I was so confused. At this point in time, who knows? I mean, is there a good outcome that can come from this? I don't know. I'm certainly not a foreign analyst. I'm not anyone that can do any of the diplomatic stuff. You've got Russia that wants absolutely nothing to do with NATO impinging on their neighbors. Ukraine wants to take a pro-Western approach, and they want to join NATO. NATO has stated that they're open to Ukraine joining. Where that leads from here, I don't know. I don't know if anyone else does.
So does Russia wants to take over Ukraine? Is that what's at stake
I would
here?
be willing to bet, and a lot of the analysis is, I've got a cat behind me that's trying to knock everything over. Apologies. The best analysis I can come up with is they really don't want anything to do with the western part of Ukraine. They would probably come in because Kiev's right on the Dnieper River. I hope I pronounced that right. I hope I didn't murder that. But they would probably push into Kiev. They would come up through Moldova and basically chop Ukraine in half until they gave in. To the east of the Dnieper River is probably the area they would want. Is one of the more densely industrialized areas. So they would have that. And they would also naturally want everything they could have for Crimea because they want their base down there. I think that they probably would be pushing for concessions to say that this is recognized as either Russian territory or separatist regions that are under their own control. I don't know what their interest would be in the West, since most of the west of the country is very pro-Western. So I don't think they would have a lot of luck, and they certainly couldn't hold it all if it was just Russia fighting against Ukraine.
Zeke says here they want a buffer zone from the West.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same principle that you have with China, North Korea, and South Korea. They don't want the West right on their borders. So that's why they're propping up North Korea.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. I'm going to try to do a resume of what you said, and you stop me if I spread anything that's wrong.
Oh, that's all right. I might be spreading things that are wrong as far as I know. So,
okay, so Ukraine seems to currently be pro-West at the time.
yes.
Well, the current government, and Russia is not. And Russia being close geographically to, they don't want a pro-West power being close to their border. They see that as a potential danger.
That Zeke is right on. They basically want to guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO.
Okay.
I'm sure that they also want to keep the eastern separatist regions. Their main argument for keeping them is protecting Russian citizens that are now living there. But
But
right.
okay. These things, from my understanding, happen all the time, everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the first time this happens. It's probably not last time. Why do we hear talking only about that recently? Is it worse? Is it bigger danger? Or is it just because we feel more concerned about it? Because I'm pretty sure these things happen everywhere and we don't talk about them, right?
This war has been going on since 2014. Back in 2014, at least I remember seeing a lot of things that were on mainstream news sources where they were talking about Ukraine. And then it just kind of fell off the radar, like news cycles go. It fell into an uneasy peace on the east, if you want to call it that. There was still skirmishes that happened, but there wasn't full-blown combat. As of lately, the thing that has gotten the most attention is the troop buildup. There has been a lot of movement in the military to get things in place, things that just haven't happened in any recent time. Russia does have, I think it's bi-yearly, they have a very, very large military war game between Belarus and Russia, but that last happened last year in the summer. So they aren't going to, this isn't part of it, and that was a planned war game. This is not.
I see here, I'm looking at this from a Canadian perspective. Yesterday, Canada gives 500 million loan, sends 7.8 million in lethal weapon to Ukraine.
Yep, I saw that post yesterday too.
What's at stake? Why would we jump into there and just take a side?
It's actually, I don't know about Canada, but it's basically the same thing that we did. A $500 million loan. I mean, let's face it, if a country's having issues with money, $500 million probably, with the expectation of it getting paid back, probably is more of a gesture than anything.
Yeah, because if you're getting invaded, you're not going to see the money back anyway.
Right. The lethal weapon, honestly, they're probably talking, you got anything from bullets and ammo to shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. I know at one point in time that was one of the big things. I had seen an order that was put out by the Ukrainian government that it was mostly man-portable anti-aircraft or anti-tank. Sorry, trying to catch up on chat over here.
Yeah, they're talking about the war games. Zeke explains that it's mostly West versus East.
Right.
Well, we have all sort of shit going on in the road. We currently have the situation in China with the younger Muslims that are being treated, let's just say, poorly.
Which is something that you never hear about that in the States.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. And we don't send money to try to save anyone over there. Why we're focusing on this one and people are letting the younger Muslim situation go on untouched? What's the difference? Is there something more at stake for us in Ukraine?
I don't think there's anything more at stake for us. Unless something goes very, very poorly, this is not going to spiral out of control and become a World War III. I think that probably a lot of it is just the mere fascination with it was always the Red Scare. You know, you've got the USSR, and anybody in the West is still going to see them as an enemy, especially as they've been portrayed lately. China, I think, doesn't get a lot of mention because of how much they actually have control in things, and nobody really wants to piss them off. Where are you at, Aqua?
Yeah, Aqua is here. I think she's in Lithuania, if I'm not...
Oh my, that's right. I do remember that.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to Dog. I don't think the country is the dogs, but we pissed off China. Oh, you did. How'd you do that? How'd you do that? Hey, Clova. Hello, Clova. Thanks for joining us. This might sound like a silly question with an obvious answer, but why is it so important to Russia to keep Ukraine out of NATO? Oh, that's a good one.
Why is it so important for Russia to keep Ukraine out of? Russia still sees Ukraine as part of Russia. That is what they've always want. I think ever since Putin has really stuck to his guns, he's really aimed to bring back the Soviet Union as it was. I mean, he's an old school KGB spy. He wants it to go back to when he was a kid. You know, that's when he had his heyday. By having NATO at his doorstep, I mean, Ukraine is literally right there. By having NATO there, one, if Ukraine was part of NATO, Russia couldn't bully them as easily. Two, if Ukraine was part of NATO, chances are they would have a very, very hard time holding on to Crimea, because Crimea is, I mean, for most countries around the world, Crimea is considered part of Ukraine. If they don't get that, they lose their warm water port. They lose the ability to strike out. I mean, it's the same thing as our argument for having Israel, right? It is a place for us to strike off from, and they don't want that on their doorstep.
Isn't Israel also a religious question, I guess?
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know a lot about Middle Eastern politics. I really am not even remotely qualified to answer on that, and everything would just go into my opinions on the subject, and that's not good for anyone.
Zeke says Russia wants to expand. Boarding country with red line is completely against that ability, even commerce. Yeah. I'd make commerce much more easy. Well, yeah, if they want to expand, I think that could make sense if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every country wants more territory. Just look at how the United States is gobbling up Canada.
What?
No, it goes back to our discussion earlier about Canada being U.S. light.
Yeah, and not everyone agreed.
Oh, I know you didn't. That's why I bring it up.
Clova says every time I hear Crimea, I hear Crimea, and I have to finish with a river.
Well, absolutely.
Okay, that's a good one. If it's not someone you control on your side, you can't exploit the region without a basic section.
Right.
Yeah.
And as of right now, I believe the closest NATO, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this would be a hell of an insult if I didn't know, but I believe the closest NATO ally is Turkey.
Look at
I've got to dig that up here quick. No, we've got Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. But Turkey is right there. So yeah, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry about that, because I know that you have a viewer that's from there.
Yeah.
Aqua. But yeah, I mean, they don't want any more on their borders than they have to have, and they very much want the Soviet Union to be what it once was. They're trying to do everything in their ability to exert power, but they have no GDP to really do anything with. They don't have the kind of spending that they could use to fight a full-on war, so they want to get back to some of the things that got them money in the past. Beyond the obvious military uses of Crimea, Ukraine was very much still is a very hot tourist attraction. Southern Ukraine is a winter destination for a lot of the top brass and the fancy people in Russia. And that is another income source. Not to mention, I do believe they have a large amount of natural gas there, which is how Russia makes a lot of their money to begin with.
Let me check here. Ukraine, natural gas. Okay, yeah, okay. I see it. Okay, so we talked about what happened. We talked about the history. Thank you so much for that. That was a very comprehensive history, and I can see that you did brought your notes to this, Fudd. Exactly. We how do you start talking about this afternoon? Because we're talking about the Canadians trucker
Oh God, how
convoy
did we get to
in
this?
Ottawa, and somehow the discussion went into how do you get to Canadian truckers to Ukrainian situation.
I don't know. I probably had it on my mind and made a comment, honestly. I've been keeping an eye on this pretty closely for the last couple days, so it's
which
probably
which
just a side comment that was made.
and it expanded into this broadcast tonight.
Yep.
Which
That is
situation worries you the most?
not knowing what's going to come out of it. Honestly. Things are usually predictable. When the US and Russia get into these kind of things, you look back at the Cold War and how many times simple mistakes almost ended things for a lot of people. Now, granted, I'm not afraid of, hearing the whistles blow and finding out that we've got missiles incoming, but it's that kind of instability that makes me worry about everything else going on. Um, so let's say Russia does invade, right? Russia invades Ukraine. They push in. They take over the eastern part of the country. They take over their interests, and you get the typical sternly worded memo from all the Western democracies that say, this is bad, you shouldn't do this, here's some sanctions, blah, blah, blah.
Please don't, but we're gonna look the other way.
Right, right. Now, something like that is only going to embolden somebody like China a lot more. And China has very strong interests in Taiwan, the South China Sea, and they want to push their presence out from there. So if they look and they see Russia taking what they want, I can see China doing the same thing. Why wouldn't they? I mean, they have no plausible reason not to because they know that the West isn't going to act. Now, let's say Russia doesn't invade. So Russia doesn't invade. Now we've got our embassy and our CIA branch headquarters in Ukraine. They have both been evacuated and moved back to Lviv. Lviv is a Western city in Ukraine, and it's very much pro-Western, pro-democracy. So that's where they have moved that back. That's after they evacuated all non-essential embassy staff. You've had, for the last 5 days, you've had governments across the world saying, come back. Biden said in his speech today, um, I'm asking all Americans abroad in Ukraine to come home while it's still safe to do so. You have these kind of messages getting spewed around. If Russia doesn't invade, if Russia doesn't make a move, that makes us look weaker in the fact that we backed off and they can laugh at our face. Now, granted, the weakness would only last for as long as the next news cycle, but it would still look negatively on most of the countries that were at that point in time. The sky is falling. We're freaking out.
Because if I'm looking back at what happened a few months ago when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, it
Right.
was the same situation where people saying bringing back their citizen, come back, come back, come back, bringing mud as everyone as we could. There was a big scare for 2 weeks. We're talking only about Taliban in Afghanistan. When's the last time you heard you heard talking about Afghanistan?
Absolutely.
Do
Absolutely. Well,
we
yeah.
know what's happening there?
I
Does anyone
honestly
care?
don't.
So what's the big scare here? Russia maybe invading Ukraine like they did
Absolutely.
to Crimea. We do
Um,
a big deal about it because it sells newspaper, and in 2 weeks it goes to the next story, and nobody gives a shit.
right. And that I honestly would be my guess is the way it's probably going to go. Is they're pushing their forces forward to give them a bargaining chip for whatever their interests are between the West and them and their dialogues. Um, Sorry, I'm on the edge of a burp. I know I am. I'm trying to avoid it. Um,
Let it go. Let it go. Let it go.
but if Russia does invade and the West gets involved with more than just lip service, more than just supplying some bullets and some armament, um, I mean that's a slippery slope that I don't think anyone ever really wants to deal with. Nobody ever wants to see the superpowers at war. Russia has a history of scorched earth. That worries me. They don't care. It's the whole if you don't have it or if we don't have it, nobody does. Um, that's a concern in the back of my mind at all times, as far as, when this kind of stuff is brought up. Like I said, I don't think it's going to get there, but that sells papers. And that's the reason you're hearing a whole hell of a lot about it right
Slam has a question here for you. What do you guys think of the Russian-Ukraine war?
now. What do I think about the Russia-Ukraine war? I think that it was a a drawn-out bullshit conflict between non-existent um, Russian forces. I mean, I say that as in they were not Russian forces on paper, but they very obviously were with Russian equipment. Um, I think that I don't know that there's a good answer to what we should have done as a Western country. I feel absolutely horrible for the people that live in Ukraine. There was actually a stretch back in 2008 or so that I was looking at potentially moving to Kiev.
Oh,
Um, it was a very long, drawn out thought that I had. There was a lot of changes in my life at that point in time, but I look at that and I look at what I've got or what's going on now, and I wouldn't want anything to do with it.
now I understand why you have a bit of an interest of what's
Well,
happening
most
there.
of my interests, I've always been interested in Soviet military doctrine. Um, you look at some of the stuff the Russians have thrown out there, they make stuff that'll last with stuff that shouldn't. Um, they have some of the most durable everything out there. I'm just fascinated with the ideology of the Soviet Union and now Russia. On top of that, I have a strong fascination in nuclear power, and with that comes the Chernobyl incident, which is in northwestern Ukraine or northern Ukraine. So I know quite a bit about that. That was part of my interest in moving to Kiev in the first place, is so that I could go up and check that out. But that aside, I generally try to keep an eye on it's called open source intelligence, OSINT.
Yeah.
um, I try to keep an eye on that, just keep your ear to the ground type of thing. And when stuff like this pops up, it sends those OSINT guys crazy. So a lot
Uh,
pops up.
I'll put you in contact. I mentioned it this afternoon, but I think you were out at the time. My day job, I'm a podcast editor, and I work with this guy called Phil Gursky, who he was a spy for Government of Canada for 30 years. Now
Oh
he's
wow.
uh, now he's retired, and he's doing podcasts to share about his experience. And he worked at CSIS, he worked at the RCMP, and he worked as a well, he was not undercover spy, but he was intercepting communications and everything. So a lot of the words you're saying are words that I hear him say a lot,
Right.
and he's currently exactly like you do, working with open source information because he don't have the credentials anymore. He's
Right.
not doing it, so he doesn't have access to the secret
Well, it's
information.
crazy what you can
But
find out there that's just out there.
that's what
Um,
he says every week in his podcast. That everything you can find out there, he says, you almost don't need to be a spy anymore. Almost
right.
everything is available.
Yep, absolutely. I spent so I've got a Twitter account that I spent building, I don't know, since 2013, 2014. Um, just all these OSINT guys and these analysts. And I can sit there and I can watch through all this stuff as it comes in. And I mean, everything's grain of salt. with open source intelligence, it can be thrown off by somebody taking a grainy picture of, the Yeti in the dark. It's a lot of the guys that I follow are very good about verifying sources, but it is still, what do you dig through? And I think that your buddy probably has a leg up in that because he would have a general idea on what makes sense and what doesn't. All I can
I
do is just be a keyboard warrior.
I really want to have a chat with both of you
I think it'd be a
eventually.
good time.
And he said, I sent him an email the other day. I said, do you want to be in my show? And he said, yeah. He said, you worked for me for 5 years. I think I owe you one. So yeah, I'll come. I'll come on your show. I said, if we
Nice.
do a debate about terrorism and all these things and foreign fighters and all of that on the debate show, I said, will you come? He said, yeah. I owe you one. I'll come. I'll come.
That would be awesome.
So let's see if we have questions from the chat here. I think we have a good overview of what's happening, why it's happening, and if we should be worried or not about it. Spork here says, Aqua Diliana says, I think we could be collateral damage. I think you're talking about Lithuania, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, just about everybody around there would be collateral damage if it got big enough. Of course, until it hits World War, III status, I think you guys are probably plenty fine.
We said this all the time, and it never happens. How many times have we heard about World War III?
Right, exactly. Back in 2016, it was Syria was going to start World War III, and then, any number of places. It's going to happen at some point in time. I don't think it's going to happen now.
Well, we're going to have it, and then it's going to be Star Trek. We're going to figure our shit out. We're going to go to space, and we're going to be all good after that.
Is that how that works?
That's how it works in Star Trek.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't know enough of the backstory of Star Trek, but I'm awesome.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to this.
Thing got so worse at some point in Star Trek backstory that at some point he said, yeah, no, never again. We're going to figure our shit out, and we're never going to have conflict again, and we're going to make everyone have their basic need filled out, so nobody's feel the need to be angry at anything, so there's not going to be any conflict, and then you're just going to focus on exploring space instead of fighting against each other.
That is very different future from some of the books that I've read lately. Bobaverse goes very differently.
Well, Star Trek has always been a very positive view of the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, with a very negative view of our current time, leading that we will fuck up so much, and we will almost kill everyone to the point that sometimes we're just gonna wake up and say, "Fuck it, never again."
Yeah, do you blame them for looking at the present and near future and thinking that we're fucked?
Yeah. No, I do not. By the way, guys, my guest here tonight is Fudd McDee. I just put the link to his Twitch page.
Hey, look, I'm playing
chat.
Sea of Thieves.
You're playing Sea of Thieves right now.
Yeah, that's what it says.
According to the bot, I think you played Sea of Thieves last.
Yeah,
right?
that was the last thing we did.
So Fudd streams 5-6 times a week now. He's streaming more than me.
Probably the next 2 weeks I'll be picking up that a lot, but this Friday I won't be around. My usual scheduled days are Tuesday night. We play whatever people are interested in playing. Friday nights are the Among Us nights, and Sunday nights are Sea of Thieves. So 3 days is generally what I go for, and then if I'm playing games, whatever it is, if I think somebody might be interested, I'll throw it up.